The comms crackled on the third abort order, and I was already 40 meters into the wreck, past the point where turning around was simple. Diver, Oaks. I am not repeating this. Site is condemned. You surface now or you surface when we pull the tether. Your choice. Harmon's voice. Machines Director, Caldris Salvage Authority. I had worked under the man for 11 years, and I knew the exact register of that tone. The part where he had already decided and was only speaking for the record. I clicked my receiver twice, which in dive protocol means understood, and which I was using to mean something slightly different. The wreck was a Velthari cargo hauler, one of their older shelf runners, gone down in the Orth collapse, 14 months prior, when the whole eastern ridge had shifted, and taken half a kilometer of seabed infrastructure. Caldris had the salvage contract, I had the dive assignment. The structure was rated unstable. Every survey said so, but the survey drones had flagged a sealed compartment on sublevel 4 with a residual biosignature 3 days ago. 3 days of my telling Harmon about it had produced exactly nothing. He had a timeline. He had a crew rotation. He told me, no obligation to risk personnel on a reading that was probably instrument bleed from the wreck's own failing life support cells. Probably. I went in on my own time, on a personal dive log, with my own rebreather and a secondary lamp rig. Caldris could argue the paperwork later. The corridor on sublevel 3 was half drowned, silt drifting up from the buckled floor plates in slow brown clouds wherever my fins disturbed them. The hauler had come to rest at a 20-degree list, which meant one wall was now a floor, and the original ceiling was a 45-degree slope above me. I moved through it the way you move through any condemned space, deliberately, one handhold at a time, testing each surface before I trusted it. The biosignature on sublevel 4 had been faint in the drone scan. Up close, with my own sensor pack clipped to my harness, it was not faint at all. I stopped outside the sealed door at the bottom of the companionway ladder and read the number off my wrist unit. It was a living signature. Smaller than any adult register I had seen in 11 years of salvage work. The door's mechanical seal was intact, which meant the compartment on the other side had not flooded. Which meant whatever had produced that signature had been sitting in an air pocket, in the dark, for 14 months. My hand flat against the door. The comms crackled again. Oaks, we are pulling your tether in 4 minutes. Found the manual release, a recessed lever, Velthari standard, designed so a child could operate it from either side. I pulled it. The door swung inward on a rush of stale air, and my lamp found her. She was in the far corner of what had been a crew rest compartment, a bunk room, 4 berths, 2 of them collapsed. She had pulled a thermal sheet off one of the intact berths and wrapped it around herself, and she was sitting with her back against the bulkhead and her knees drawn up watching me with eyes that took up too much of her face. Pale gray skin, 4 fingers on each hand curled around the edge of the sheet. She was small, smaller than the number on my wrist unit had even suggested. Velthari young, unmistakably, though I had never been this close to one. She did not move. She did not make a sound. She watched me the way a creature watches something it cannot yet classify as safe. I killed my headlamp to its lowest setting, so I was not pointing a beam directly at her face. I unclipped my secondary lamp, a small handheld, and set it on the deck between us, aimed at the ceiling, so the light was indirect and even. Then I sat down on the wet floor of the doorway, at her level, and I waited. The comms said, Oaks, I am pulling the tether. I pulled the tether jack from my harness socket and set it on the floor beside the lamp. The child watched the tether coil into the water at my knees. Then she looked at me. Something in her face shifted. Not trust, not yet. A reevaluation. I had just cut my own line. She understood what that meant, even if she did not know why I had done it. Took off my secondary rebreather, a closed-loop emergency unit, chest-mounted, and held it out toward her in both hands. Not pressing it on her, just showing her what it was. She looked at it for a long time. Then she reached out one small gray hand and touched the face of it, tracing the seal ring with one finger. I nodded. She let me fit it over her face. She did not flinch when the seal engaged. The wreck moved. It was not a large movement, a settling, the kind of deep structural complaint that old wrecks make when the silt shifts underneath them. But it was enough to bring a cascade of rust-colored water down through the ceiling seam above the collapsed bunks, and enough to change the angle of the deck by another 2 degrees. In a condemned site, 2 degrees is a conversation you do not want to have. I picked her up. She weighed almost nothing. She tucked her head under my chin with the instinct of something that had been waiting a long time to be carried, and I felt her hands grip the strap of my primary harness and hold on. I went back up through the corridor the way I had come, except faster. The silt was bad now. My fins had stirred it on the way down, and the settling had finished the job, so visibility was down to the reach of my arm. I went by touch and by the dive map burned into my wrist unit, one corner at a time, one bulkhead at a time, child pressed against my chest and both my hands working. Sublevel 3, the companionway, the midship passage with the buckled wall I had noted on the way in. The wreck moved again, harder this time, and the buckled wall became a buckled ceiling, a section of it dropping into the passage and taking my secondary lamp with it, dark. I switched my headlamp to full and kept moving. The exit port was where I had left it. I pulled us through into open water and finned upward, hard, burning the last of the good oxygen in my primary tank because there was no reason now to conserve it. We broke the surface 60 meters from the Caldrus platform. Harmon was waiting at the dive platform with 2 safety crew and the expression of a man composing the paperwork in his head. I climbed the ladder with one hand, the child still held against my chest with the other arm, and I set her down on the deck grating before I pulled off my own mask. "You pulled your tether," Harmon said. "I did. You are aware that is a terminable offense under the Caldrus operating code." "I am." He looked at the child. She was sitting on the deck grating, still wrapped in the thermal sheet she had carried up from the wreck, watching him with those enormous eyes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "There's a Velthari authority vessel holding 2 kilometers out. They've been trying to reach us since yesterday. I told them the site was condemned and we had no information." He paused. "I will radio them now." "That would be good," I said. They came alongside within the hour. A small gray Velthari cutter, clean and fast. Nothing like the old shelf runner, rusting on the bottom below us. 3 of them came aboard. The one who knelt down in front of the child on our deck was older, her gray skin darker at the temples, and she spoke in a low continuous murmur that I did not understand a word of. The child looked at her for a long time. Then she turned and looked at me. I crouched down to her level and held out my hand, palm up. She placed both of her small hands in it for a moment, 4-fingered, light as a held breath, and then she stood up and walked across the deck to the Velthari woman and let herself be gathered in. The older woman looked at me over the child's head. I did not know their customs. I did not know the right gesture or the right word. I put my hand flat on my chest and held it there. She did the same. Harmon terminated my contract that afternoon, as promised. I signed the paperwork without argument. Standing at the rail while the Velthari cutter shrank toward the horizon, I found I did not have much to say about it. You do the accounting later. In the moment, there's only the level you're on, and the one below it and whether you've checked it yet. I hadn't. So I did.